I'd like to welcome everybody out for our commission meeting on this third day of July. If you'd please stand and repeat the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get into the agenda, I think it's appropriate with the 4th of July coming up, and the other commissioners can add to it if they'd like, just to give my thanks to all those who have served, who are serving, or who will serve to protect the freedoms of this country, and not just those that serve in the military, but those who are in our emergency services, our officers, our ambulance. Thank you for all those who protect and serve and defend us as a public. So thank you. Commissioners?
I would just add that, I appreciate you mentioning our appreciation as a commission for those who've served, and also throw out that for all those who have served in those capacities, that there are free entrance tickets available for you to this week's events for Energy Days and Warrior Days. So make sure you bring your families and have a very enjoyable time.
I would just add that, our first responders really are a backbone to our community, and those that do and have served in our militaries. And just thank you. What a great nation we live in, and what a great time to be alive with everything that we are blessed with.
Thank you, Commissioners. We truly live in a blessed nation. Item number 1, and pending the decision, will be immediate. We have rotation of the commission chair. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion that we rotate our commission chair as we do every 6 months to Commissioner Meller.
I'll step down and second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioner Hopes. Item number 2 on the agenda, we have the presentation of the Employee of the Month, Rose Barnes.
Commissioners, this month we have Department of the Month. And I'm going to let Tina explain why she nominated IT. IT is the Department of the Month. They probably are the Department of the Year because they do so much for all of us all the time. And I personally, and I know they've been nominated before, but I really can't thank them enough. They keep us running and operating, and without them we would be lost. And it's like all of us having our emergency becomes their emergency. So thank you, Department of the Month. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit, Tina.
I just to repeat what Rose said, they do everything for everyone. And IT is not just IT. And I worked here for a while before I learned that, and so I nominated them because they've been a great help to me personally in my office, with not just IT, but creating documents that I don't even know how to create. Barry's been great. They've helped with graphic designing, photography, video, and when I moved from the tourism office back to planning and zoning, Barry's team helped me cart everything over, and we got everything done. So I really appreciate everything that they've done to help me in my department and everything they do for the county. So,
and if I might just
come on up, guys.
Steve.
Just to add to what you ladies have said, IT truly is the backbone of everything that we do now. With information technology, we are, as a society, requiring more and more of all of our employees, whether it just be that they utilize text messaging for work, or that they implement, time clock features and job costing and all of these other things. It all becomes streamlined and saves the county a lot of money and a lot of hassle because of where we are with our IT department. I know other counties that they either do not provide certain services, or their services are very limited because they are lacking on the IT side of things. And so I definitely love to commend our IT department, not only for what they do as what is expected, but for being exceptional and for doing more than what is expected and helping the county save so much money.
Thanks for being a talented bunch.
Thanks.
I just want to say that it definitely takes a team, and that's kind of the way we operate is as a team. And so all I can say is we've got a great team, and so thanks for taking note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have number 3, approval of minutes, but I don't see a set of minutes here in the packet. Do either of you commissioners have a set of minutes that need
No.
approval?
No.
We'll move on then to item number 4, public hearing on proposed amendments to Carbon County Development Code. Commissioners and I guess Christian, do we want to present this a little bit before we have this public hearing?
I think Todd could probably give us a brief introduction, and then we could go into that. Sure.
Very good. And then Todd, as you're presenting this, I know that there are a few questions. I think we can bring attention to those before we enter the public hearing as well.
Okay.
And let's just make clear what section number
That's just what I
of
was gonna
the
say.
development code you
Of the
just
Development
introduced.
Code, Section 3, zoning and general requirements.
So with Section 3, like it states, it's the general requirements for our zone. So it goes over prohibited uses unless they're expressly permitted, pre-existing uses, non-conforming, a lot of the general requirements that are in there. A couple of the biggest changes that are in Section 3 that we're proposing is requirements for accessory dwelling units, where they'll be allowed to have living quarters in there. So if they want to put a shower or a bathroom or kitchen facilities, they can do that in accessory dwelling units, and there's standards in there that outline how those can be done. The other substantial change is parking requirements. Previously, the parking requirements, it's stated in there that the county may, by resolution, adopt regulations for parking. So we put those regulations in this section so people didn't have to look somewhere else. So it outlines how off-street parking standards are going to be addressed with the type of businesses, how many spaces for each one, and those are all detailed in there. So those are the biggest changes within Section 3.
Now, are those parking requirements, are they changed in any way other than they're just included in Section 3 where they were
They're
before?
new. We never had outlined parking regulations that I was able to find, so we've adopted a set and included them in Section 3.
So, for example, most of these are commercial parking
Yes.
regulations. If you look on Section 3.3.34, it talks about off-street parking. So there's general off-street parking standards that apply in general, and then there's also a table 3.3.4G, which is a table for parking standards for specifically for different types of commercial uses. And then you should also note that Section I, on-street parking, indicates that the County Commission can adopt regulations relating to on-street parking to protect the safety of the public. So we don't have specific regulations governing on-street parking, but we do have off-street parking regulations that are broken down by commercial use, as well as kind of some general off-street parking requirements in Section 3.3.34.
The one section, or in that particular section, the one thing that I did find somewhat lacking is, and maybe we should do this after the hearing, you tell me, Christian, but with the growth of the Airbnbs and some of those kind of private homes that are renting out, how do we require parking that's adequate for the number of people that they may say can dwell there? So that was one hole that I did see as I read through that.
So with that, they would also fall under the dwellings in the apartment listing. So right now it has 2 spaces per dwelling unit. So that's how an Airbnb would come in. With Airbnbs, I believe the best way to address those is through our business license ordinance.
because it falls under another category. But if coming in, they're going to build a structure, we don't always know that it's going to be an Airbnb type of business. But at that point, we let them know that 2 spaces are required for that dwelling unit. If they then decide to do an Airbnb, it falls under the business license ordinance, and we can address parking regulations within there, because generally speaking, an Airbnb, there's more cars in there than a regular residence, so there's some different standards that I believe should be used in that circumstance.
And I understand that, and I agree that the business licensing is a great place to put that, but I also believe that anyone seeking a building permit or looking at these kind of regulations, that there should be something there that addresses the what if, and then of course the licensing portion of it can come through, because you know, if that's their intent, they may not put that forward at the beginning of the process, but they better realize that, you know, there's going to be some parking requirements.
So, yeah, I guess I was misspoken then when I said that that table only includes commercial,
Yeah.
because it does include dwellings, apartments. So that would apply. Typically, you can only have an Airbnb in a dwelling. In other words, has to be a place that's authorized as a dwelling unit. So I do think that would probably satisfy any and all types of buildings that could become a short-term rental. But you could also, we could add a line in there that says dwellings, apartments, any building that may become a short-term rental. The question is whether we want to have any additional requirements for short-term rentals than we do for standard dwellings. And I see a little bit of a problem there if you're telling people that they've met that they can't have a short-term rental unit just because they don't have more parking spaces than the average dwelling unit, than your
Well,
standard dwelling unit.
And I almost wonder if we get beyond what is realistic to police at that point. And so if we synchronize them to where they're the same, would probably be the best.
But I agree that we do need that. We do need to put those in a business license ordinance separately as well.
Now, Commissioner Hopes, I believe you had some further questions.
One of the problems I see, it's relating specifically to this, the Airbnbs, is oftentimes if they're building the home, they build a much larger home than a regular dwelling, with say 5 or 6 bedrooms, 3 or 4 bathrooms, and it's not the average. It's not what you would build as a dwelling. So they're building it specifically to rent out to more than just two vehicles. So I agree that there needs to be something that addresses specifically that. If they're building more than just an average master bedroom, 4 bedrooms, or 3-bedroom type home, there needs to be some way to address that, either through business licenses and how we address parking with them, because a lot of times, specifically in Schofield, they built, I don't know how many rooms that was, lodging for 40, but no parking, no parking. And so if we don't tell them up front, here, maybe it's directed in this portion, say if you're planning on doing this, you must meet the business license requirement or something. I don't know how we word that, but
And I wonder if
I
that could
think
be,
there's, I mean, you brought up Schofield area. We've seen larger homes in and around Price that are built than, or just the same size as some of those that are rented for Airbnb. So it's hard to determine. We've seen some come in that do have large numbers of rooms, and I don't believe it's the building department's responsibility to sit here and determine, are you going to use this for your single family use, or are you going to rent it out? I don't know what they're going to do. If it turns into it, I think there's other ways to address it, but I've seen more homes built in and around the unincorporated areas of Price that meet your criteria that you just mentioned than we do that are rented out for Airbnbs.
I wonder, because as you mentioned, Todd, this may not be the responsibility of the building department, but I wonder if when you guys are reviewing permits and you see plans for homes that would have that potential, that maybe it would just trigger something from the clerk's office to send them a notice saying, hey, if for any reason in the future this is to be used for business, there are a different set of standards. And it would just be an internal policy or internal step to be taken, that it would just be a notification that, hey, in the future, if you have other intended uses, there are, you know, business license requirements to follow.
That's something we can look into.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to in this table on 3.3.34G. It lists businesses, dwellings, manufacturing, restaurants, retailers, but it does not specifically say Airbnbs. And so, do we put it in here that Airbnbs must reference the business license, or
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is that
okay?
Is that typically, if you have a dwelling, if you own a house or you own an interest in a dwelling unit, say a duplex or a house, or own a condo, our statute, our ordinance says basically any dwelling unit can be a short-term rental. So that's where I'm a little bit, if you're going to say only short-term, you can only have a short-term rental unit if you have this many parking spaces. I'm a little concerned that then says to some people, well, I've got a small house, but you can't, and I can fit 2 cars here, but I can't fit 3 cars here, so now I can't use mine for a short-term rental. I'm worried about whether that would hold up if that were challenged. But where you have something such as, if I have a house that has 8 bedrooms or a house with a certain size, then I've got to have a certain number of parking spots. That might go farther. Or, you know, you might say, well, I don't know, I'd have to look at it. I guess I'm a little leery about saying certain, if you're limiting use of your property to a short-term rental because of its size rather than its specific geographic location, I'm a little concerned as to how that would hold up if that were challenged.
Well, and I would hate to make us liable by trying to put forward in code something that is not enforceable and not realistic in court, but I think it might be a better
But I think
step,
there's
better step just to have it as part of a informational through your business license.
What about adding it somewhere in the line that is hotel and motels? The way that reads is 1 space for each sleeping or dwelling unit. So if if you added short-term rental, Airbnb, whatever you wanted to put in there, then that definitely puts an indicator that, hey, if I'm a 5-bedroom home and I'm going to intend to do that, I've got to have 5 spaces just like I would if I was a hotel or any other type of a lodging facility.
that would probably work, because in other words, if you're going to construct your house and you know you're going to construct it for that purpose, then you're on notice that you got to have 1 space for each sleeping unit. If you build it and say, I probably won't ever do this, and you build a house with 8 bedrooms, and then you later say, I want to do this, you might be limited on how many rooms you can rent out or something like that.
Because my concern is, we're assuming because you build a large home that you're going to rent it out. And I'm only aware of 2 homes in the county that are large that are being rented out currently. Doesn't mean more of them won't be.
But they were built specifically for that purpose. Both those builders intended when they built those.
And that's where I don't think as a building department we're discussing it, what their intentions are. They're building it for a single family structure home. I think that's where, so we're just going in and going to have to assume, say, okay, so you're building a large home, so are you going to rent it out? If you're going to rent it out, here's the thing. So we're going in there with the assumption that it's over so many square feet, the possibility is they're going to rent it out.
I think we're missing the point in that if we add short-term rentals to a line like hotel motel, it doesn't matter.
And
If
that's,
that's your intention, that's what the standard will be. If you're building a large
Yep.
home and you're putting a 3-car garage on it, that's fine. We're not saying anything different than that.
and I'm fine with that. If that's the way we go, it's just if you end up switching and renting it out, now you're an Airbnb. Here's your requirements, but
But that's handled in the business license.
that could be handled in the business license, because right now the ones that are currently doing it won't be affected by these changes we make in the development code. So anything that is in
Correct.
effect now has to be dealt with through the business license. Going forward, we can address it, and that's if they build a large home and then decide to rent it out, then do we make that determination, okay, let's say this was recommended or was passed. Now you understand where you're at, so it's a short-term rental. Now you have to have one space for each dwelling unit, now that you've changed to a short-term rental.
I guess what I would like to see is if somebody's intending on building a short-term rental, we don't tell them, oh, you only have to have 2 parking spots, and then in the end, and they tell, up front they're telling us, yeah, I know I'm building this, and we told them, well, all you got to do is build 2, but they built a 10-bedroom home and 2 parking spots. Now we're not going to let them have a business license because they didn't provide enough parking.
And with this, like I said, we have one instance where parking's an issue. The other instances, there's enough space for them to park. So if the homes are built on even a half-acre lot and it's a large home, there's enough space to park.
Right.
I mean, you can say, well, you're going to park here, here, and here, and you have enough spaces designated for one dwelling unit. We just have one where that's the issue. So I like what Commissioner Potter was saying, add that to the hotel motel, and if they go with that, if they change it for whatever reason, then you fall under that category.
Okay.
Well, we've had a good discussion. I think we'll probably have a few words after the public hearing as well. So I think right now it's 4:54, and we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you, Todd. And so if you'd have any comments, concerns, please come to the mic, state your name for the record, and we'd like to hear your comments. Okay, on section 3, I have several comments. My name is Leonard Topolovic. In general, I think we still need to review the he's and she's within the document to make some of those genderless for positions. Also, with an example of 337, the renumbering and reinitialing of the different sections after we've removed them, such as on line 177. That probably needs to be like a G, and then the next one H and I. There were several of those types of things in the document, but we probably just need to run through that and make sure those get corrected. Comments on the Airbnbs, from my perspective, is in the zoning code, a lot of those zoning codes are set up to say single-family dwelling. And so if now you're introducing Airbnbs and these kinds of things into a single-family dwelling, you're basically changing the intent of that zones and what you're allowing in those. So I think we just need to be careful what we're opening ourselves up to, even if you're trying to do restrictions and things like that. In section 338, if you look at that, it's telling you that we're still prohibiting the parking or storing of a vehicle that might be broken down. If you have a flat tire, it's wanting you to move it into a garage before you fix it. Yeah. It's just not reasonable to ask somebody to move. I can see what you're trying to accomplish there, but I still don't think we're covering it right to where if you have a flat tire, you have to move it into your garage before you can change your tire.
The next thing that's probably the most critical on my list is Section 339. If you read through that particular area, it's now opening up the option for parking commercial diesels or commercial semis into residential zones. That's basically the way that it reads to me. Anything above 12,000 square feet, and to me, we're defeating the purpose of trucking terminals, because another portion of your code that you're trying to pass today also indicates that that you're going to restrict semis to 5,000 or 1 per 5,000 square feet. Well, if you look at an R20,000 zone like Spring Glen, that means you can have 4 semis parked in on your property. Now, are we opening up trucking terminals? We've already raised the issues with trucking terminals and things of that nature. I just don't see it to be a legitimate use to bring an industrial use into a residential area. And that's what we're trying to do, or at least that's the way I read this. It's restricted in the 8,000s, but anything above that, it's going to be allowed because it doesn't restrict it. I think this whole thing should be removed, other than maybe the parking and storing of trailers and campers, that particular section, and that be dealt with in the zone descriptions for each of the zones. Okay, and then on section 3317, conditions may be imposed. It'd be section C. Is that truly going to be the planning commission that makes that, or the zoning administrator that makes the sets the conditions on that particular one? And that's on page 3-7. And once again, as we're changing from the county commission over to the planning and zoning group, at some point we need to make sure that the public has input on these things, and I'm still not seeing a whole lot of that in section 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl Lupo. I want to reiterate everything that Lena said. I agree with her on the, especially on the storage of commercial vehicles in residential zones. This particular issue has been brought up numerous times, and it seems to be little by little inching forward to get that trucking outfit down the street from us zoned so they can run coal trucks out of there. And I know a few years ago when we brought this up, there was only supposed to be 4 trucks in the yard, no fueling with diesel fuel, and 25 miles an hour going down the road. None of that's going on. 5 o'clock in the morning, those guys are shooting out of there probably at least 50 miles an hour.
Cheryl,
and we're 2 houses away.
Where do you live, Cheryl?
4663 North Spring Glen Road. Okay. And there's never been a posting of that 25 mile an hour speed limit ever, and that should have been posted a long time ago. And Lena has brought that up numerous times of how many elderly people are on that road, and all the turns and the highs and the lows in the road. And where we're located at can get a little dicey when those guys are trying to come and go. It looks like we're adding 100 RV slots in that RV park, so that's going to add to our congestion. And I would like to get those, if we're going to have diesels there, if we're going to run coal, I'm fine with running coal. I'm a huge proponent of coal, but I've always wanted to see if we couldn't find them another home, and then just get that industrial aspect out of our backyard, out of our residential area. That would be what I would like to see done. As far as I would like to see the signs posted again. It needs to be in here too about the trucking outfit, and if the verbiage in here, I would say, just like Lena said, about the commercial vehicles in a residential zone, I think the verbiage needs to change a lot. The other problem, and I know it's not highlighted in here, is let's see, is obstructing view. That's the other problem we have in Spring Glen, is the trucks, when they're not, if they were coming out of there going 25 miles an hour or even 20 miles an hour by the time they reach two houses, then if we're pulling out of our parking lot or our driveway, there's been many times that we've almost been clipped by those trucks. I myself have gone out to my mailbox and almost been run over by those trucks because I'm looking, they are almost to me by the time I get my mail out. And so there, I believe it's just such a huge problem. It really needs to be moved somewhere else. And let's see, 3.3.11, clear view of intersecting streets and railroad to be maintained. Now I know an intersection is 4 ways. It says no fence, wall, hedge, or similar device which will obstruct the view of automobile driver, nor be in excess of 4 feet in height, shall be placed on any corner lot. I think that needs to be changed to not just a corner lot. I have an a problem with clear view sight out of my own driveway, and I believe that planning and the gentleman next door to us never got permitting for that. And you put up I think it's almost 10 feet tall, so when we come out of our driveway, we can't see. Neither can anybody that comes in, and it's dangerous. We've almost clipped a few people because you can see one way, but you can't see the other way. And so I think something needs to be changed on this corner lot business. It looks pretty good as the triangular area formed, and I've also noticed that there are probably 3 different definitions of fencing for the county. You know, the county has given out 3 different definitions for fencing or shrubs or hedges, or, you know, and it all obstructs view. If it's obstructing view, it needs to be lowered, or, you know, something needs to be done. But I think you guys should go through and find those. I have them mapped out at home and make one definition for clear view and stick to that definition. But the rest of it, everything that Lena said, I agree with.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this public hearing at 5:04 p.m. Todd, I don't know if you'd like to address any of those questions that were brought up. And Todd, before you do that, would you identify for us the association that is written on your shirt? The association embroidered right there?
Oh, it's the American Planning Association. It's one of the organizations I belong to for planning. So to address the commercial vehicles and residential zones, I can see adding, you know, other residential zones, particularly the R120 zone, which is like a half-acre zone, to limit the storage of commercial vehicles. As far as requirements for trucking terminals, that's regulated by the zone. So if a trucking terminal comes in, it's not going to be permitted in a residential zone. So that's specifically identified, you know, for areas that it's permitted in, or a conditional use, and that you can't have has that density factor. So putting in, you know, the 20,000 square foot lots, no storage of commercial vehicles, I can see that as a possibility, but the other terminals is regulated through the zone.
In other words, you already are not allowed to have a trucking the one that was being spoken of here has been grandfathered in because of how long it's been there and whatnot. But otherwise, if you were to start a new trucking terminal, you could not put that into a residential zone.
Okay.
So, but Lena brought up, well, if you have if you're in an R1 20,000 zone and you do have 20,000 square feet, that one provision says that
You could.
you
yeah.
can have a truck for every 5,000 square feet. So,
Technically, it would allow for residential use and for semis.
right, and so Todd's saying, well, that makes some sense to then eliminate that one, as we ought to add that into one here that says you can't, that's one where you can't do that. That's a suggestion.
No, you had any other comments?
No, go ahead,
Okay.
sorry.
And then was mentioned, you know, the storage of junk and debris in 338. I can see, you know, if we need to clarify that a little bit. I mean, obviously the intent isn't, you know, if someone has a flat tire, you know, to do anything about it. It's when you have that storage of junk inoperable vehicles that we could address it specifically. So if we need to tweak the verbiage there. With the clear view of intersecting streets and railroads to be maintained, I think, you know, if we eliminate that corner lot and just say, you know, it can't be any obstructing fences, I can see some enforcement issues there. I mean, now with the corner lot, you know, you lower the fence so you can see over it. If it's any fence going throughout the county, that can be an issue. I believe in our definitions we've talked about a clear view or a clear view of a fence and an obstructing view of a fence, and have some terminology in there to address those. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. But saying, you know, a certain percentage of the fence that you can see through is obstructing or not obstructing. So other than that, I don't know if...
There was just one other question that I would like to reiterate was, if somebody has a broken down vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
You know, if Sheriff Jeff Wood has a broken down vehicle, is that going to be an issue if that's in his yard? You know, if that's in his front yard, if, you know, I mean, how do we, I believe the intent is to get rid of unsightly debris so that people aren't trashy, so to speak, but then does it become too restrictive on all of us if our vehicle's broken down for a couple days out front of our yard with a missing tire or something?
And I think where, you know, if it's broken down and it's being worked on, I don't think there's an issue. I mean, if it's wrecked, junked, you know, partially dismantled, inoperable, or abandoned, that's where if it's something where, like I said, he's replacing the, you know, the starter or the battery or something like that, and I mean, it's broken down in that sense. But if you're starting to part it out,
So
I think that's where we
I wonder if
draw
we
the
need to
line.
add like a time frame. So if there's intent to repair it, that's typically done in a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but if it's there for a month, or I don't know what would be an appropriate timeline, then the intent to actually proactively do something about it perhaps isn't there or doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I wonder, I don't know, commissioners, if you have another opinion, but would that address the issue?
I don't know. And I spoke with you earlier about this. I worry there are a number of individuals in our community that like to restore cars, and they'll bring in, say, 2 Camaros to work on them. They're parting out one Camaro, but they need to leave it there so they can use the parts, the body, the quarter panels, whatever it is, to rebuild the other car. They're in the process of rebuilding a car, but yet they do have 2 vehicles sitting in their yard. Do we require that they put it in a garage? If so, that could stop most of that. And some of those cars are, I mean, there's quite a following in our community of people that build and restore cars. But we do have another problem of people that they wreck their car, they park it in the back because for whatever reason they're sentimental, or they park it on the side and it's wrecked. It's not a collector car. It's just a whatever, a Geo Metro or whatever, and it's wrecked on the side of the house. It needs to be taken care of. I don't know how we address that situation.
So to your point, Commissioner Hopes, I actually know of another community that has a, in their code, not that it be garaged, but that there's a side obscuring fence that it's behind. and that limits the visibility of neighbors to what they might see as unsightly. And then it also doesn't require that they build a garage or, you know, other things of that nature.
And I would agree with that in places that it's possible, but we also have some neighborhoods up here in the avenues where getting into the backyards is next to impossible to be able to put. I mean, the house takes up all the frontage, so getting it to the backyard would not be a feasible thing. So what do we do in that situation? I'm just trying to, for those that are doing it, how do we make it possible? Do we put a timeline? You only have a year? Well, I have a friend that built one over 5 or 6 years, because that's how much time it took to build it out. I don't know. I just have some concerns with that area.
And that's something we can address, because we want to make sure those that are, we don't want junkyards,
Right.
allow people to, you know, if they're working on a hobby car, have that balance. And I think that can come down to if someone's calling in and asking about it, you know, working with that individual and seeing what's going on. If it's becomes an issue and nothing's being done, we can address it. At some point it's going to be left up to determination between me and working with sheriff deputies and saying, no, this is an issue, it is a violation, so we need to move forward with it. And so I don't know where to draw that line, but some of it's going to have to be left up to interpretation.
Well, and
Right.
I would also note that I think a lot of the space restrictive areas are more in the cities, whereas this would just be a development code for the county, where typically, not always, but there is a little bit more space.
Okay.
Anyway. Commissioners, there's been a lot of discussion here. I don't know if you're comfortable with making a decision at this point. If you are, I'm open to hear a motion.
There's another question. I just would like legal more comment. Is that possible?
You can submit us a comment, and I would also encourage those comments that have been made, so they were recorded and they were taken for record, but if you would also give us a paper copy of your comments and any comments that weren't given during the public hearing, and definitely address those to Todd's office. So,
If you're referring to Commissioner number 5 on our item on our agenda as far as review and a possible approval of amendment, I would make a motion to table that and make appropriate changes for further review before we go forward with that approving.
okay.
I'll second that
We
motion.
have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I would just say also that as we are tabling this, Todd, this association that you belong to, I wonder if you might be able to provide us with some examples of other counties and other areas where they also have ordinances similar to what we're looking at. That way we can see what other areas are doing. Specifically because in Austin, Utah, a small little community, I have an uncle who has 3 semis in his yard, you know, and it's not really a disturbance to those around him. He doesn't operate necessarily a business, it's all sole proprietor use. And I'd hate to have someone like him be restricted here locally because we're trying to limit greatly his ability to own multiple vehicles, so to speak. Now, obviously, it would become a concern if multiple drivers are showing up to operate vehicles out of someone's yard, but that's not the case. So how we properly address all of these concerns that have been brought up today, I'd like to see how other counties address those same issues.
Okay. All right.
I think you still need to call for a vote.
All in favor? To
Aye.
table? Aye. Thank you. All right, we've had our public hearing, and we've decided to table that item.
Number 6.
We have now, we are now going to open up a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the Carbon County Development Code, Section 6, on the subdivision. Could we have just a brief overview of that, Todd, before we open the public hearing?
So Section 6 is our subdivision section. The major changes to this is also allowing the planning commission to have approvals for subdivision that come in for approval. We addressed that in section 2 where we talked about the land use authority being the planning commission, and this would allow them to do the administrative actions of approving subdivisions. So this goes forward and allows them to make those final approvals. And another thing is all the subdivisions would come to the planning commission. Currently we have site plan that approves subdivisions of 3 lots and less, and then anything that's 4 lots or more comes to planning commission. And I think giving planning commission authority to review all of the subdivisions will create more consistency within the development of the county, because if we have 3 lot approved over here, and then on the other side of the street, you know, then someone else comes in for a 4, 5, 6, whatever lot, one board will be looking at all of the subdivisions so they can take that into consideration. So those are the 2 biggest takeaways from section 6.
And I would just add that a lot of that really does make sense, in the sense that, you know, if a contractor is only able to tackle a project of 2 or 3 lots at a time, you want the same committee that's going to look at the overall future project of maybe the 20 lots and the subdivisions they might overtake in the next 10 years.
And that's where we want to really look at it, so that if all of a sudden they're trying to do 1 and 2 lots for 20 lots, we can make sure that the appropriate road is built and established and the infrastructure is there, rather than just letting them go 2 lots out of a time and then being like, oh, okay, here's your development that doesn't have all the infrastructure we'd like to see.
Well, with that description of the proposed changes, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at 5:19 p.m. And anybody wanting to provide comments, please come to the mic and state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Lena Toplovic, and I'm just going to speak on the changes that I would like to see in section 6. On section 633, currently you guys have, or the county had an ordinance or a change that required, if there was a zoning change, to notify the adjacent property owners, and I'd like to keep that enforced by adding that also into section 633, so that the adjacent property owners would also be part of this process. In section 635L, I'd also like to see secondary water systems, so that they're identified as well on the utility improvements and installation where those secondary water systems will be located. I don't, again, see anywhere where there's a public hearing associated with the subdivisions, so that concerns me across the board. Again, then also down in section 638, it should be line 200. If you'll just read through that, the sentence doesn't, I think it needs to be changed, because it says, upon approval by the Planning Commission, the chairperson of the Planning Commission shall sign the plat, and with the recommendation that the plat be approved and proposed dedications accepted. I don't think it's really telling us what they're going to do on that particular one. And then it looks to me like section 6310 should actually be 639, now that that's been changed, and the same thing for 6311, it needs to be 6310. And then on, let's see, line 262, it refers to the Planning Commission. It says refer it back to the Planning Commission. It seems like, does it need to go somewhere else, or do we just need to table the request? Rather than, because it's the Planning Commission making the decision, they can either approve it, disapprove it, or refer it back to themselves, or would it just be to table it?
When you say table it, do you mean just
Or something to that
erase
effect?
it or delete it? Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, maybe just to table it. And then in section 644, line 281, following approval by the Planning Commission, I think that change needs to be made. Or it needs to be by the Planning Commission, right?
Which section is that again, Linda?
It's in section 644, line 281. Because it's actually, it used to say approval by the Site Plan Review Committee.
Yeah,
I think it
right.
should be approval by the Planning Commission. Okay. And then it might be a better thing to do is to take the subdivisions that are lots that contain 1 through 9 lots, put them all into one, because basically the 1 through 3 and the 4 through 9 follow the same processes pretty much. And since you no longer have a site plan review committee, why don't you just combine those to make it a little more readable, so that everybody's following the same processes for those kinds of lots. And I have to agree with you on what you said about somebody coming in 2 lots at a time and building a 10-lot subdivision by not, we just need to somehow make sure that we're not building stuff 2 lots at a time and getting away from following all the rules of a major subdivision, so that we're not taking care of the drainages and we're not taking care of all those things that are required in that major subdivision. And then in section 683, line 451, I think that's just the county staff, but it should be maybe the county planning staff, because I think you don't want the whole county staff to deal with that, right?
Are you suggesting it doesn't need to be there, or?
No, it needs to maybe be there, but just be the planning staff or the planning administrator, or the zoning administrator, or something like that. And then on street lights, I'd just like to bring up maybe that we ought to put something in there for impacts to other residences. Some kind of verbiage there. I'm not sure what it might be, but that we don't want
the impact in what regards?
In the regards that if you have a street light outside, if you're near a street light and you have a bedroom right there, it's pretty darn bright. And so, I mean, is there some leaning that can be done on the light structure itself, or something like that, so that people can at least get sleep. But anyway, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has comments on Section 6 of the Development Code that they'd like to share during the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this public hearing at 5:26 p.m. Commissioners, we've had the public hearing for Section 6. Right now we have the line item of the review and possible approval of amendments to the Crum County Development Code Section 6, subdivisions, and adoption of Ordinance 499. What are your thoughts, and how do you feel about the discussion we've had during the public hearing?
Commissioners, I worked with Christian and Todd earlier today as well. I also believe that there should be some form, whether it's to the Planning Commission, of a public hearing for, if nothing else, the larger subdivisions that impact large areas. It allows for an opportunity to maybe see unforeseen or have the public tell us unforeseen items that may not have been addressed, that can be addressed then before, or mitigated before before approval of the subdivision. So I would like to see something in there, and I've talked to Todd about maybe coming up with some language. So my motion would be to table until we can have some further language clarification for that. If there's other things that you'd like to add to that, we can look at those as well.
Just as a point of clarification, Todd, in regards to what Commissioner Hopes is saying, would we possibly be able to, yourself or the staff that is reviewing a 1-lot or a 2-lot, development, if you can identify that this has the potential to become more than a 1-lot or a 2-lot, that it could be a larger subdivision in the future, or that they're going to eat at it, 1 or 2 lots at a time, but it is a larger scale process, would you then be able to make a recommendation to have a public hearing at the Planning Commission level? Mm-hmm. I mean, is that the process that is in line with what we're doing?
I think that's something that we can address. And currently, the way it's situated, there is no public hearings. Just the background on that, with administrative actions, it's not required. I can see the reasonings for having public hearings. With administrative actions, you have standards that are developed, that we follow, that say as long as you follow A through Z, you're good. And that's why we have these, so we can get input on how to do these subdivisions. I would think with public hearings, my thoughts would be to have it at the beginning, at the conceptual phase, because I believe right now we have public hearings when it's final at commission meetings, and so when things are brought up, we're kind of so far down the road that there are times where legitimate things get brought up that if we'd known in the beginning, it would have saved us a lot less headaches. So to have a public hearing at conceptual phase saying, okay, here's where it is. It won't hold up the developer anyway, and we can have that public hearing whether at Planning Commission or County Commission, either body I don't have a concern with, because they have to have a conceptual to start with and then a preliminary and final. And there has been times where a preliminary and final have been wrapped together because they made enough progress, but at minimum there's 2 meetings to go with those larger subdivisions, and so we can write that in so that those concerns can be addressed at the beginning, and then we can go to the developer and say, here's some things that the public's concerned about. How are we going to address these?
Okay. I think that would be an appropriate place to do it is in the concept phase of the development. But I think it's important that the public have at least an opportunity to have their voices heard or their concerns mitigated through an engineering process.
Mm-hmm. Did you have more to add?
No, I was just going to say I agree with Commissioner Hopes, and I second his motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to table. And Todd, with those comments, obviously we'll look forward to some adjustments being made to that for our review, and we'll put it back on the agenda when we have those. All right, so now we have item number 8 on the agenda. Public hearing to receive comments regarding an application for the U.S. Department of Transportation's BUILD Transportation Discretionary Grant. BUILD is an acronym, all in bold, for the design and construction of improvements to Ridge Road, including but not limited to improvements to the road's safety, increased capacity to carry utilities, and its integration with SR6 and SR10. Before we have this public hearing, Commissioner Hopes, will you provide us with some comments?
Yes. So just for the information of the public that are here, the BUILD grant was formerly known as the Tiger Grant, and it was changed and additional monies were put into it by President Trump. Specifically for rural counties in Utah, there was $125 million dollars that was put into rural areas for rural road developments. Now this is not just for any road, but it has to have an economic development component to it, and there is also a safety component. It has to bring up the level of safety and security for the area. The project that we have identified with the Utah Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments and Jones and Emil is Ridge Road. Ridge Road is a major industrial route for our community, and it carries a lot of truck traffic. Because of the large volume of truck traffic in somewhere between 2011 and 2013, the state turned that road back over to us. Seth, do you remember the exact date? It was somewhere in that time frame when it was turned over. When it was turned over to us, it had some significant deficiencies, some major rutting, some safety concerns. We have spent a significant amount of money on that road, but it still has some significant problems. And this build grant is a 100% grant up to $25 million. We're going. We don't have a full cost estimate of what we're going for at this point, but we are looking to fully rebuild that road and bring it up to as close to UDOT AASHTO standards as we can, which could potentially include 2 bridges, the one that goes over the railroad and also the one that goes over the river. So with that comes some environmental work. So this build grant entails all of that work to be done. Any right-of-way acquisitions, which I don't know that there will be any right-of-way acquisitions. We do have 100-foot, if not more than 100-foot in some places, right-of-way. I believe this will, because of the amount of truck traffic, will be a good thing for our community, and it will also relieve a substantial burden on our taxpayers if we can rebuild that road, and it will secure some of our trucking into the future, at least for the next foreseeable future, up 15, 20 years and longer if we maintain it.
Now, Commissioner Holmes, just as a point of clarification, in a previous discussion, you had identified that this is a 100% grant, but a lot of the successful applicants oftentimes do something in kind, or they have some other matching monies. What would be, just on a hypothetical basis, feasible for our county? So we're actually going for 100% grant on the build side of this. We are looking at going to the CIB potentially for the engineering costs as a show of good faith, and I think that works well with the CIB as well. They like to see partnering on things. I don't know how this would be received at the CIB. Obviously, it's been in their conversations, especially with the 7-County Infrastructure Coalition. They have it on their list as a project. We have it on our county CIB list as a project. And if we can come up with the money to build it, which would be the larger cost, I think the CIB potentially could be partnering in that. And that's kind of the direction we're heading. Very good. With that introduction, we'll go ahead and open this public hearing at 5:36 p.m. And anybody that has comments to share, please come to the mic and state your name for record.
Name is Jared Hansen. Just to maybe clarify on one of the latter points, having money to match in this application is irrelevant. It's a completely different program than previous programs, and as was stated, is intended to be a 100% match or 100% grant program. What makes these projects more successful in this case is more of the term along the lines of shovel-ready. They want roads or projects rather that are ready to go. And so it will take some preparation to bring this project to the forefront. But if you go back on the timeline, there has been several studies and multiple looks at this road in the last 6 to 7 years, trying to get this road, figure out what we can do and how to pay for it. And so when this project came forward, in our partnering with the county and looking at this and trying to find fundings, this just fit the mold. So we will do that. It's not 100% sure that the grant will be awarded, but we're willing to go through it at this point in time, and then hopefully if we're not, then we could again look at it next year, but at least at this point begin to make those preparations that, as I stated, to help it become a shovel-ready project. That's kind of where the build part comes in. There is a maximum amount allotted to each entity that's resourcing or applying for this. That's a $25 million cap, and so we're hoping that we'll be underneath that. That would give this project a good look. But by all studies, we've looked at several different options that have gone over this course, and it's been anywhere in the realm of 10 upwards of $30 million was the one that was done by UDOT several years ago. So it is going to be an expensive build when this project is ready to go, given the circumstances. So being able to look at this in a way of 100% funded through that grant, shy of the pre-construction services, is really an economic help to the community and the county. So,
all right, thank you.
Cheryl Lupo, who's the grant writer?
So we're kind of co-writing this. Jones and DeMille brought the information forward. We contacted the AOG to help write the cost benefit analysis to this, and the county is also supporting in what, so we're co-writing it. The applicant will be the county.
Okay, and then 25 million is the cap on it, or that's how much it's going to cost?
No, is the cap on the grant. Projected numbers, we think we're going to be well below that, depending on, I mean, if you build the Cadillac, it could be upwards of 30 million. What we're looking at doing, and the conversations we've had with UDOT, as soon as today I had a conversation with a UDOT representative. Some of the things we're looking at would be sufficient, and they're supportive in this process as well. We don't have final numbers. The numbers we were kicking around were 16 to maybe 20 million.
And it's going to start like SR6, come all the way around to
Highway 10. Yes, so it would be a complete Ridge Road reconstruction.
And then the bidding process, I mean, you guys during that, is it just going to be for the road, or is there going to be electrical, sewer, water, internet?
Any improvements to, yes, whatever improvements that need to happen in order to put the road in and not have somebody dig the road back up to cross it with fiber. We definitely want to make sure we put all those in. That's part of what the engineering process would be.
So the monies will be available for the utilities part too?
Yes, it would be a complete, and that's where some of the costs were coming in. That's why the cost was so high. If there are any improvements to any of that, or even utilities that needed to be relocated, because as you widen the road, they may need to be pushed back, that would be included in those costs.
And just out of curiosity, what about the airport road? Any future for expansion on those parcels with utilities with this same kind of monies?
Potentially, year after year, we can go after this money as long as they're offering the grant. This was the first one, and it was probably one of the major ones because of the industrial traffic that's on that road. We want to make sure that we're partnering with them. So this was just the first one.
This is a federal grant?
Yes.
Now, Cheryl, just as a point of clarification, during these public hearings, it's usually just a comment period, not a question and answer. And we want to address your questions.
I get that. I know that.
But you know, in the future, you can make your questions, but we probably won't answer them until after the public hearing closes. And so, just as a proper order and procedure. But we
Still
appreciate
wanted
your
to ask them,
questions.
citizen. Just
Yeah.
want to ask.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We want to answer your questions. We do.
And so in the future, so far, you know, as far as like Helper is concerned, there can be some infrastructure built over there. What I'm getting at is that this federally funded money, is it just a one-time deal and they're never going to do it again, or it's just like for right now?
Yeah, we'll comment on that after the hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to comment on the item we are addressing? Seeing no further comments, we'll go ahead and close this public hearing at 5:43 p.m. Commissioner Hopes, would you like to address the remaining questions?
From my understanding of this grant, it is not just a one-time. We can apply as many times. Doesn't mean we'll get funded every time. What we're going after now doesn't mean that we will get funded. We think it has a good opportunity to get funded because of the economic impact to our community. But it doesn't restrict us from ever going after any other monies. So yes, we can apply for other.
As far as the applicant goes, it doesn't have to be the county, does it? It could be Helper City.
It does have to be, it has to be a government entity.
So
it can be a city. Matter of fact, the city of, the one by Zion's, Springdale.
Yeah.
The city of Springdale is actually doing a co-application with the state of Utah to do a transportation bill as part of the money. So $125 million was given specifically to Utah for rural roads. And so UDOT is partnering with Springdale to do an application because of the amount of traffic in that small community. And so it doesn't matter if it's a city or a county, anybody can go after these funds. Does that answer your question? So yes, we can go after this more than once. If they fund it, great. If not, we'll just keep trying.
Commissioners, as it appears in the Federal Registry, this is for appropriations for 2018. And also on the first page, it says the department is committed to addressing the unmet transportation infrastructure needs of rural areas. So the Federal Registry also spells out a number of those specific questions that you asked. And even though you may not have asked all that you want, I would encourage you to go onto the Federal Registry. It's dated April 7th of 2018 under their notices, and it gives a full description of what those billed grants. And that would be available, like we said, to any of the cities, any of the organizations. It'd have to be a city or a county, obviously, that those infrastructures could be done. So that's vital information for city councils and others that would be looking at that.
And if those cities would like to, obviously, as we are doing our application, we have a little experience with this, so if they'd like to collaborate with us or come to us, we'd be more than willing to help them with that.
What's the name of the grant?
Build. It's called the Build Grant.
It's the Bill Transportation Discretion.
It's item number 9 on the agenda, 8 and 9. So moving on to item number 9. Commissioners, consideration and possible approval of proposed application for the U.S. Department of Transportation's Build Transportation Discretionary Grant for the design and construction of improvements to Ridge Road.
I would make a motion that we approve the application of the Build Grant.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 10 on the agenda, consideration and possible approval of proposed grant application for the Department of Workforce Services Intergenerational Poverty Plan Implementation Pilot Program. Jade, would you please come and speak to this item? Jade Powell.
So I'm Jade Powell with the Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments. I'm also the Carbon County Care Coalition Coordinator. And so there's an opportunity for us to apply for the Intergenerational Poverty Plan Implementation Pilot Program. That's a mouthful. So this IGP grant It's a one-year grant. There's $900,000 available for us to apply. There's no cap or no minimum on it. And the application has to come from the county, so the county has to be the applicant. And so that's how come they'll need your approval for this. But the AOG is planning on writing the grant and doing everything in that nature, and we'd be a sub-grantee to that, so administering the grant and everything. And this would be to run and to help expand the Strengthening Families program that once was started with the CARE Coalition, and more of geared towards the IGP portion of the CARE Coalition and running that.
All right. Now, you've already explained this grant and some of it to the CARE Coalition.
Correct, and I got approval from the key leaders to press forward with this, and again, since the county would be the applicant, that's why I need your approval for this.
In the grant, would you mention how much you're asking for?
I believe right around 150,000. That's what we're looking for, and so there is a 25% match with that, and we're still working out the details for that. It wouldn't be from the county. We're looking at other possibilities with using some of the circles money that we have in our program to use as match money, along with some of the other money that's available through the CARE Coalition.
And just to clarify, the ask today is just to submit the application.
Correct.
Okay.
So since the county would be the applicant, the county has to, I just found this out earlier this week, the county would have to apply. So it would have to come from a county commissioner actually hitting the submit button. It's actually just an emailing the application to the IGP board or whatever.
You would prepare all the details?
I would prepare all that for you, but just a heads up, and I'll have it all prepared in advance for you guys to review too. So to submit it and to mail it off.
Okay.
I have no problem with the application. I think the pending part of it would have to be, if it was awarded, where would the $37,500 match fund be coming from? But I would make a motion to approve the application, and then subject to, if it's awarded, we'll have to have that discussion as far as the matching funds go.
Okay.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioners,
Motion carries. Thank you.
I have a question on this one. It indicates that we have to specify in the program measurable outcomes and key indicators that we're going to track, and it details out that the county is going to be responsible for tracking and reporting on those. Do we have a system set up that we can track and file those reports? I understand the AOG will be actually preparing those, but are we currently gathering those statistics? Because it asks about baseline numbers, what outcomes and statistics we're going to be able to provide, and currently we don't have anything set up to gather any of that information. So that's one of the things that I looked at and said, I can't do that. And the other one was the match that we were concerned with.
The program that this money is going towards has a little bit of history, and it has a little bit of that tracking already, unless I'm mistaken, right?
Correct. That's something I'll have to dive more into with the Strengthening Families. The Strengthening Families program is still here and is still going, but they lost some of their funding, and so it would just be to help move that. And so that's information that we can pull from them.
And I'm sure it's going to be included in the grant application, how you're going to measure and track.
Do we need to have an agreement with the AOG, since they're going to be the one tracking that they provide us the information? I don't know if we need to go so far as to have an agreement or not, but that may be one way of...
Or maybe an MOU.
Just a simple MOU or some kind of an agreement just says that they will provide us the documentation that we need to... Okay.
That was something that was on our agenda as well. But the grant becomes a little convoluted because we've never been listed in your IGP plan. So on the 11th, with the key leaders, we're addressing that. So that's where it changes the dynamics of it, so we can be more involved.
And you're also on the agenda here on the 18th.
Yes,
to
Exactly.
address that issue as well.
After we go through the 11th, yep, that's correct.
So, okay.
Also on page 36 under, this would be 7B talks about the DWS will ensure the program is trained on quarterly and annual reporting requirements, including due dates and methods of reporting. So I assume that there's an element of DWS that has to be involved with this beyond what just the county, the county and
Well,
the AOG would be involved with.
Well, and with the AOG, most of our programs, our umbrella agency is DWS, so we're
Correct.
well versed in those reports. But Zach's been involved in all these conversations.
That's
as
where
well.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the grant is from DWS, so they would be who would be submitting these to. Appreciate it, Jade.
Thank you.
A motion and a second, and it carried. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we have next on the agenda, item number 11, consideration and possible approval of ordinance 497 vacating Oliver Lane as a public right-of-way. Christian?
Commissioners, last time you wanted to do some research as to whether or not you ought to vacate it in light of the fact that those who spoke at the public hearing mentioned their concern that the road might be gated. We also had some concern as to the extent of their ability to maintain that access. I've done research on that. There is no clear-cut answer as to whether or not the owner of the servient land, meaning the owner upon which the easement lies, can gate or cannot gate the property. It's based on the history of the use and on the reasonableness of the use. You cannot, basically, you can't diminish the extent of the easement. You can't diminish the you can't diminish anything that's written in an easement. So it's unclear to me whether or not Ms. Morris could set up a gate there. I did speak with her. She told me she does not intend to put up any gate. I informed her also that if the property were vacated, that those who hold easements would have the right to maintain that easement. They could take reasonable measures to make sure the easement remains usable. That might include putting down some gravel, doing some grading. All of these things she indicated she's willing to work with the neighbors on, and I tend to believe that she would do so. Regardless, those persons who do have easements to their property, and that's all of them who live on that lane, would have the right to enforce their easement rights in court and make sure their easement rights are not diminished in any way. But a court would have to decide that on a case-by-case basis. So I guess my answer to you is, can she put up a gate? I don't know. She may be able to. Can they maintain the easement so that they can use it? Yes, they can. Can they expand the scope of the easement? No, they can't. Can she limit the scope of the easement beyond its extent right now? No, she can't do so either. Again, I would reiterate that my purpose, my thought in bringing this to you, and my understanding as to why you agreed to move forward with it initially, was because we determined that you cannot, that if we were to bring this matter before a court of law, a court would say, county, you did not establish this road as a public road by using it 10 years continuously by the public. It has not been used 10 years continuously by the public. You did not receive a written grant of a road, so nobody ever told you you didn't get permission, or it was never deeded to you as a road. You did make some assertions that tended to show you owned it, but acting as if you owned it is not the same as owning it. And I believe a court would say that the county does not own this road and that it is not a public road. And so for the purpose of removing any doubt or ambiguity as to who owns it, that's why we decided to go forward and bring this petition forward. My sense is that you remain there. There are not any grounds as to why you should not go ahead, unless you were concerned that somebody were to lose access, or unless you had other information that you believed shows that this is a public road. I really don't think it's a public road. I don't think it ever was a public road, but we ought to remove all doubt. And I don't see good reason at this point not to go ahead and vacate that road.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have comments? I know Commissioner Hopes, you've looked into this quite a bit.
The only comment I would have is to the Hughley family, I'm sorry to hear that your mom had a horse wreck. That's horses are very unpredictable. Other than that, I would make a motion to approve the ordinance 497 vacating Oliver Road.
Commissioner Potter, do you have any other comments?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 12 on the agenda. Consideration and possible approval of Resolution 2018-08 authorizing the County Commission to submit a class action opt-in notice for underpayment of payment in lieu of taxes, also known as PILT funds. This is a class action lawsuit that Kane County has currently that we are, Christian, you can clarify me if I'm saying this wrong, but wanting to participate in. Which would then, if they win, then we would be subject to the same benefits.
Well, in fact, there has been a court decision that said Kane County was deprived. The court decision basically said that when Congress set up the formula in the U.S. Code as to how PILT is to be calculated, Congress has to continue to pay it according to that calculation, and they cannot, and even if they under-appropriate those funds, they still must be paid by the Secretary of the Interior. So wherever that money needs to come from, it still needs to go to the counties, even if Congress doesn't appropriate sufficient funds for that to happen. So Kane County already prevailed on a motion for summary judgment, finding that for 2015 and 2016 they are to receive, Kane County is supposed to receive those funds, and basically that ruling will have broad application to every other county that was to receive PILT funds, because what Congress did was to spread the payment out, spread the underfunded payment out to everybody, so everybody was shortchanged for 2015, 16, and 17. So it looks like it's just a really probably going to be a matter of deciding which counties are involved, finding out how much they missed out on, and the court entering an order. So the court has certified a class action lawsuit. We need to appoint a person to simply file the opt-in notice for the county and to be the person who the county will remain in contact with, or who the court and the court system would remain in contact with.
Commissioners, I called Carla Johansson from Johnson from Kane County. She said it's approximately 1.5% of the total of those years. So we're for 15, 16, and 17, there was about $3,267,769 that was paid in PILT, that were payment in lieu of taxes. So 1.5% of that would be 49,000 roughly. She said it's not a 100% number, but that's about the percentage. So we're not talking about a lot of money, but there's also a principle behind it. As was stated, is our own citizens don't get to just opt in and say, I'm going to pay a less amount this year. And although this is not tax money that we're collecting from the federal government, they have agreed to pay us a certain amount each year for being a landowner in our community, and so they should pay that.
And in essence, what this is we're just holding them to that agreement that they promised.
Correct.
Commissioner Potter, do you have any comments?
No, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-08.
We have a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Commissioners, as part of that motion, you need to appoint somebody who's to be the liaison.
And who would be an appropriate person, Christian?
You know, I could do it. Todd could do that. Could be one of you. You know, I know, for example, Commissioner Hope sits on the Special Service District Board, and and has some involvement with PILT and is kind of probably the commissioner who has his finger on what's going on with respect to mineral lease monies. So that's probably who I would propose, is that you nominate Commissioner Hopes to be that person.
Commissioner Hopes, what are your thoughts and feelings on that? Do you want it to be an employee, or would you prefer to stay at the commission level?
I don't have a preference either way. I think Todd could very well handle it. If I'm appointed as well, I could make sure we get it tracked out. So either way.
I know as part of Todd's payment structure, he is being monetarily compensated to watch public lands, and this is kind of on the legal side of public lands. Christian would also be a valid individual to do that as well. Commissioner Potter, what are your thoughts?
I'll amend my motion to also reflect that Todd Thorne be appointed.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
So we have an amended motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
We'll have to let Todd know that the train came through tonight.
Yes, I'll talk to him about that.
You know, people who are absent get volunteered for things, right?
That's right.
Anyway. Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Item number 13 on the agenda, we have the review and possible ratification of letter of understanding with Roger Brooks International for a day-and-a-half boot camp.
Commissioners, after our community assessment by the Roger Brooks International company, we also had the opportunity to participate and have them back for a boot camp. Again, it's a co-opt opportunity through the Utah Office of Tourism, and so the cost of it is being split between the county and also the state of Utah. Anyway, because of the timeliness of when this needed to be returned, it has been signed and sent back to them. It allocated July 19th for a full day and Friday, July 20th for a half day, and time has already been allocated to the cities on the Friday, and a wrap-up session with the county and others on the, on the Thursday. On the Friday is the wrap-up session. So this is just an opportunity to ratify this and to move forward with those dates that have already been set.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the ratification of the letter of understanding with Roger Brooks International for a day-and-a-half boot camp.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Before we leave, I guess we're wanting to admonish everyone to be safe and buckle up. Thank you. Did I say that right?